I'm so sorry.
It is.
We're
My fault.
recording. Welcome to the Easthampton Development Industrial Commission meeting for today, whatever day it is of November 2019. The 19th, thank you. We are going to formally go till 5:30 today. That's a 90-minute meeting.
Sure.
And I would like to open this with a reminder of our mission as a committee to support and enhance the economic environment for current and future businesses, residents, and the community at large. So, do we have a motion to approve the October 15th meeting minutes?
Also move.
Okay, any
I'll
seconds?
second.
Great. Any discussion of that? No? We approve first and then we discuss? All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Any abstentions? Great. Those minutes were great. Thank you, Josh.
You keep buttering me up. I'm going to keep doing it.
Correct.
Bland.
That's
There's
how
a method
that
to your
works.
madness.
We don't currently have a member of the public here. It is possible that a member of the public will show up and will just sit by and listen and possibly participate. A man named Bryce, who is a roommate of Laura Britton's. He is either an economist or urban planner kind of guy and seemed really excited about the prospect of being involved in EDIC or the ways that we think about the city. Regardless, I would be very pleased if he showed up. And anyway, there's that. So, planning department updates. Jeff Bagg.
Thank you. Can I just
Go
look
ahead.
at the- Is there anything else? It's just so many pages. I think I just want to say three things.
Three things.
So just in general, I'm starting to try to get some words out about Ferry Street, mainly the road improvement part of the project. So things are moving very fast, and so we have a contractor on board. It's Gomes Construction, and they are out there. They're figuring out exactly what they can do next and when. And
Is the roundabout going to the right of the intersection as you go up the hill? Is it, I mean, when I say right, just a slight shift?
it's probably a slight shift, and I think the key thing that everyone has identified is there is the grade of the road comes down slightly to make it less of a dip down into Ferry Street.
Yeah.
They won't be doing any of the rough road work probably till spring, and they're doing a lot of utility work. They're saw cutting and getting ready to go underground and work on utilities. What we had previously thought was that they were going to kind of go down on Ferry Street and do some utilities, but we've had some back and forth with the Office of Dam Safety, so the Ferry Street Road is part of the dam. So they've shifted to the upper part of Pleasant Street, Lovefield, and so they're doing all their prep work and infrastructure work. And then what you'll see happening this week is they're also going to rough in a temporary bike path crossing. So that's a key component of the project is to keep the bike path open. And so there's just going to be a lot of activity, and we're trying to figure out how, through the planning department, the city of Easthampton's Facebook page, the mayor's office, and through city council, to start trying to get regular updates. So lots of stuff is happening, and it's moving swiftly.
Somebody was getting skewered today on social media because you probably saw it.
I have not seen it yet. That's a late night activity.
They cut a couple of holes into Pleasant Street up on top, like you suggested.
Yeah.
Probably filled them in very nicely, but the rain overnight, I guess, caused some serious washouts, and it sounded like cars were literally falling into a sinkhole. Early morning commuters were literally falling
Maybe
into a
that's what I hit
sinkhole.
this morning.
Somebody,
Well, I know
some cars
that-
hit them good, and I guess they've contacted the city.
Yeah,
There's put them in charge
Yeah.
of contact with Gomes for any
Yes.
repairs.
Yeah, there's-
Gomes, G-O-M-E-S?
Correct. Yeah, there's going to be a lot. I mean, it'll probably slow down once we get snowfall, but then, it's going to be a big project come spring. So it's just lots of stuff happening. It's full speed ahead. And it's
The only message
very
to the
positive.
community at large should be, stay the heck away from there if you can.
Yeah.
There's plenty of ways around,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
That's- between Parsons Street and around town. There's plenty of ways around there.
Yeah, I mean, the contractor's commitment was to keep at least one lane open. I mean, their objective has been all along to not do full detours.
Right.
And it's just, so that's not the objective. But so, I'm trying to formulate the proper information to go out, and then we're just gonna try to create this steady pulse of information. So that's our street. The housing needs assessment and housing production plan is currently out to bid. So we're soliciting proposals, and I believe the due date for submissions is December 9th. And what that will do is it should be pretty informative for this group's next meeting in December, that in theory we'll have a consultant chosen, but it'll still take some time to get them, we have to formalize a contract and a scope of services, but that'll be sort of good news for the December 9th meeting, and it kind of dovetails with any discussions of the housing partnership.
Mhm.
The vision is that this group and the housing partnership should be involved in that process and discussions. That's good news. And then I didn't see it on the agenda. I did want to say that there was a previous discussion, I may not have been here, for wayfinding.
Yes.
Citywide, just the concept is that there's a Massachusetts Downtown Initiative, it's MDI, and they offer, every year, it's relatively small, it's a $10,000 grant opportunity for certain things. And many municipalities have done the wayfinding, and I think it's something that I think this group talked about, and I think it's a good time to try to prepare an application to have a consultant hired to come in, and this group can be highly involved and come up with discussions and concepts for wayfinding.
I'm also on the Public Art Committee through the,
EDIC.
yeah, no, not ES,
ECA.
Yep.
all these acronyms, and we're working on that as well.
Yes, and I think we should join forces.
Yes.
So anyway, I got word from the person at the state that the application should open up in sometime in December, and then it's usually probably open for 4 weeks. So I think there would be some ability to have help come from this committee to prepare certain parts of the application. So
Did we establish, I don't remember, at a previous meeting, who would be interested in being part of a ad hoc, let's get this application done, subcommittee? I feel like people expressed interest, but I don't remember if we wrote it down. Why don't we try it again? Who would be interested if, what did she say? Did she say mid-December? I mean, probably the end of December is nightmare time for everyone.
I think mid-December is when they will release the application.
So our next meeting is December 17th. If it was coming out after that, we would not be able to use a formal meeting for that, but a subcommittee could plan to meet. Who might be interested in being a thinker about the wayfinding application?
I like to write, but I don't know what wayfinding is.
Oh,
It's basically maps to give people like, oh, there's public parking here. This is
Like
rail
a-
trail.
Oh, that kind of
And creative
wayfinding.
science, too.
Yeah.
Creative science.
Yeah.
Like you are here kind of thing, and where you want to, what you want to see in the rest of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a couple towns. So Northampton has, there's a whole bunch of different variety
Yeah.
to it, but if you're coming from Route 5 into Northampton and you hit Conn Street, Northampton has that sign. It's like part of like a railroad. It says "Welcome to Northampton," and then they're kind of scattered throughout. So that's kind of like the highest level at the gateways, and then you get, one of the things that anecdotally has been observed is like if you're coming into Easthampton for the first time, let's say you're coming on Route 10 and you hit the Rotary, like there is pretty much a lack of direction. If you've never been to Easthampton, the only thing you're going to rely on is your phone. So like orient people to the Mill District or
Right.
Cottage Street this way and that kind of stuff. So it's a real opportunity, and I think, not to belabor this, but I think the other known sort of lacking area is the mills. So we spent years renovating and revitalizing the back, But when you're driving down Pleasant Street, if you don't know what's back there, you miss
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
so there's definitely some needs and some value in kind of exploring it. And it's a $10,000 grant that there are some examples online. So Casey's the only one who said yes.
Cassie, does that interest you?
You
Beyond,
said yes?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I've sat on the,
Can you detail what it would entail a little bit more?
it's a pretty short grant, I think. It basically requires us to do some preliminary thinking about what do we think some of our thematic areas are
Yeah, all right,
in the
I'll
city,
help out
and
too.
what we might want to direct people to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
put me on the list, yeah.
Chris, Josh, and
I
Casey.
mean, you don't have to be a martyr for it, but if you
No, I
want to.
just, and I really think we should do everything we can to work with ECA.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will say I was on that for a little bit. It's kind of slow to get things done. So
Wait, this is being
just,
recorded.
you know what I mean? Just committee-based stuff is just slow and.
Yeah.
Um,
Just as long as we don't put anyone's nose out of joint.
oh yeah, no. Definitely want to use they've done a lot of work already.
I see that as forming some narrative really around, you know, like you said, the places in Easthampton are valuable and attractive, but here's like a picture of the Rotary, Pulaski Park, whatever, and
Yeah.
is it Pulaski Park?
Mhm.
Yeah. And we have no indication of where you go from here, and so like just to kind of
Yep.
articulate the exciting things that are happening, and then here's like the need, or here are the areas we'd like to explore, and just kind of create the pitch.
Yep.
But to complicate that spot, is there a conversation about Main Street getting consolidated there? You know, the Futures Committee or whatever that the
Yeah, the
Downtown Strategy Board talked about maybe making a park there.
Yeah.
So does that interfere? I mean, that's what the issue is with Union Street, right? Isn't there a Wayfinder map that we have for Union Street, but they don't want to put it in until they do the road work?
Yep. Yeah, I think all that, you know, that's why you hire a consultant, because they can flesh out a lot of that stuff.
And I think that to the extent that we have a city that we currently want to direct people in, we apply for what we can anticipate is true in the near future, and we need to respond to the current need.
Yeah.
But boy,
I think
I got
of the
big
things
dreams
heard in the
about that.
downtown study and the Main Street concept is probably
Yeah.
very far out.
Yeah.
Okay.
With like, you know, we have the schools to contend
Yeah.
with, and so that'll happen before something really significant.
Gotcha.
But
All right.
that
Yeah,
was
I
that was
just-
a pretty bold proposal to like
Yeah.
reconfigure the road and make the park bigger. I think that's,
But not to oversimplify it either, I have to assume these wayfinding things would be movable.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You
I think so,
You
yeah.
know, granted, they might be concrete to the ground, but you can pick them up and move them.
You
exactly.
can.
Yeah.
Not to oversimplify it, but.
No, I think it makes sense.
Does it include stuff like where's leaf recycling and stuff like that, or is it really just?
If we wanted to, you know what I mean? It's whatever.
I think it's primarily for people who are mobile, who are coming into town.
Yeah, so you would assume the residents would, it wouldn't be for
Residents should
residents
know
as much as it would be
yeah.
for visitors.
Yeah, it's for visitors.
Got
You
it.
assume residents know how to get to the Mill District, or you assume residents know how to find one
Like
kind.
an
Or
element of
parking,
tourism.
which, you know,
Yeah.
how are those parking sandwich boards working out? Is 50 Payson filling up?
If 50 Payson is being used more, I wouldn't necessarily attribute it to the A-frame, the small portable signs, but we installed the 2 banners here. And that was really just very small, it's part of the incremental steps that we need to promote it. It's hard to know
Hard to
at this
tell.
point. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we should expect out of the downtown strategic plan is that at some point, we should probably do a specific parking use study
Yeah.
and do some of these evaluations, but.
I think the answer will come quickly with, there are 3 upcoming dates for open houses at open studios at One Cottage.
Yeah.
I think you'll see them,
Yeah,
everything fill up.
Well,
Yeah.
Mission Cantina opening up this week.
That's true too.
Definitely fills a lot of parking spaces.
Yeah.
So I think demand will make people have to look a little
Yeah.
deeper and realize, oh,
and at least it's there.
It's a block
It's kind of that
away.
baby step.
Too
Yeah,
far.
first baby step. Yep.
Jeff, do you want to share the Westfield State internship update?
Sure. For some time now, I've been trying to figure out, my capacity to take on an internship, but then also the structure. So, the personnel director set up a relationship with Westfield State, so the personnel director's objective was to get formal connection to starting with Westfield State, and I'm asking to create the same connection with UMass. Basically that an internship structure is doesn't need to be paid for by the city, but that it's a program that is accepted by the university for credits. And then basically then we essentially have the pipeline that we need to potentially reach out, advertise for an intern in the planning department, and possibly two. So Gwen and I met twice, and the preliminary objective of the potentially the first intern, which would start maybe in January, would be to have them work on gathering data for economic development. And so basically a lot of my efforts have been to try to gather enough information to update the master plan again. So it's time to update the master plan, and we've been trying to activate these different projects that will feed that process. So the intern could, work on gathering some data, meeting with this group, and I think the concept would be that this intern could report to this committee and possibly get some assignments, and then also report out what he or she is finding along the way. And the structure that we're trying for is to create that overall project, to update the chapter of the master plan, but then build it so that 3 interns over 3 semesters could do it. And then each intern would have a beginning, middle, and end. And so it's something that is not just a one-off, but something that we can pipe in the first intern, and when they're done, the second one comes in and can pick up and do more of that work. And then by the third one, ideally they'd be putting down like some draft, narrative and data that would support the economic development part of the master plan. So that's the goal.
And so once you're all hooked up with Westfield, you can, I guess the biggest hurdle is getting approved by Westfield, right?
Right.
As
Clear
a
that
legit
hurdle.
place to send interns.
Yes.
And once you do that, I guess if you come up with more needs, you could just put out a request.
Yep.
Kinda. That's great.
Yep.
I think that there's an expectation that City Hall has a certain number of interns, and that we're not going to suddenly have 19 interns.
No, sure,
But
sure. Yeah, that's great. We've seen that a lot.
Yeah, and there's a lot of need, but I think a lot of it is, and this is I think this is a known thing, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of managing. So
Yeah.
it's a capacity question. Like I definitely want to start with one and just chart out, like how could we get the first 3 under one project and make sure that that's going to be workable. Like I definitely can't manage.
Yeah, you
more-
might as
more
well
than
you
one
might
at
as
a
well
time.
just do the work yourself. Right? Believe me,
Um,
that's what it's like.
Jeff, if they've got a January start date, that first intern, like mid-January, late January?
Right, yeah, sometime, I don't know, I did not check the university calendar, but yeah, usually they start the second week in January or something.
Yeah, UMass.
So-
I've got 2 potential candidates that I reached out to one, and I'm gonna meet them, and then meet the second person, and then just kinda, from here it's a little bit informal, whether it's a formal interview or just, this person seems like a.
What kind of
match.
majors are these people in?
Civic?
One, though, I can only recall one, is environmental science
Okay.
with some GIS. So I'm trying to figure out, if we want to wait a little bit longer, just get a pool of people and see who might be the best fit.
And you say you're doing this with UMass, and there's someone else doing it with Westfield State?
So right now, the personnel director has initiated the process with Westfield State, and so we have that ability to advertise with Westfield students
Yep.
that there's an opportunity in the planning department, and the job description's out. But I do want to build the mechanism for UMass too. They have a master's in regional planning course there. So.
Okay.
Do you imagine finalizing this project, this large project, and the interim project structures with me, with other folks from this committee. It's not going to be something that we can effectively do this entire group.
Correct.
Do you have a preference? Does anyone here have a thought on how we best structure that?
I think that if you and I met possibly 2 more times, I think we can hammer out the basic structure, and then my job is to get the person registered or signed up and ready for January, and then, you know, I think the idea has been to help service this committee and to kind of move some things forward. So that's the primary objective, is have this person come to each meeting, like probably not January, so like say February, with an outline of what they're gonna do, and then use that every month, reporting back to this group, hand out their progress and give data and show that progress to this committee.
I mean, I guess I would see the specific tasks for this person coming out of you more than out of us. I mean, I don't know what tasks we would come up with for the individual. I mean, this wayfinding grant could be a great example of, here you go. We'll put this together, maybe with 1 or 2 people from the committee working with that person,
Yeah.
but let them do the bulwark part of it, if you will.
I think it should be driven by the elements of the master plan chapter that are reasonably within EDIC's concern, purview, and say, all right, here are the things that we've been working on most regularly recently, and here are ways that you could help us immediately respond to a couple of these sections, for example.
Yeah, I mean, there's really basic data that I simply do not have, which is, what's our largest employer? How many employees do they have? What's the second largest employer? You know, and usually, like, it's pretty common data to get like the top 10 employers, and then you could do a variety of just that simple baseline data. You know, that should be first, and that's just something that people can gather. And then I guess I'm not hesitant to try. I would aim for like January to put a task list in front of this group and say, are we missing anything? Is there anything else we can kind of add and tailor this? I think January would be a good target date, because I don't think the intern would be on board necessarily ready for that first meeting in January, but for February.
Yeah.
So something like that would work. I'm willing to commit to that.
I like that.
I agree. Okay, cool.
Great.
You feel accommodated? Can we? All right.
Yeah, please move on.
Affordable housing. 3 topics. Let's start with letter C. There is an informational forum about accessory dwelling units on Wednesday, December 4th from 6 to 7:30, held at the Easthampton Council on Aging. You can register on eventbrite.com. I will be there. Come sit with me.
What time was it on Wednesday?
6 to 7:30.
And where was it? Council on Aging?
The Council on Aging. Mhm.
Okay.
So, I drafted a letter of support to be submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals on behalf of Sarah Hunter and Chandra Linnell at 8 Mayor Street for the ADU that they've proposed to build in their backyard. Have folks had a chance to read it?
Yes.
Any suggestions for additions, deletions, utter changes?
Just a thought.
Tell me.
I guess I was thinking that our position might be a little bit more global. You know, in other words, supporting this specific project is great,
Yep.
but are we supportive of ADUs citywide in general? And, oh, by the way, there's one before you that we'd like, so I'm not so sure
Fair point. The
I'm not so
framing
sure I
could-
read anything here that was more global, that says we support this concept. I mean, Chris identified 110 lots in Easthampton. Are we going to have to write a letter of support for everyone that comes forward?
Fair, so it needs more global
So
framing.
we can get to that, because I have something here
Okay.
to talk about.
Okay.
And we'll come to some sort of resolution on this,
Okay.
hopefully today.
Great.
I mean, absent of this being, if this was a one-off, if this was going to be the only one in Easthampton, I would say sign this and send it in, let's support it. But
That's a valuable perspective.
we don't necessarily want to have to write a letter for 110 that come before the planning board.
Absolutely.
And I think you even said at our last meeting that they're looking to potentially change some zoning so that this could be done by right,
Right.
as opposed to having every one be a special permit.
Yep.
Yep, so there's stuff that could be added and there could
So
be a different frame.
we should potentially support, if we choose to, we should support the zone change that allows it to be done by right, provided you meet certain criteria.
Exactly.
Okay, so why don't we
Want to go with
tie
this?
that directly into your thing, and then maybe we come up with whether we're still gonna submit this
Well, I
with
have
some
enough.
changes to its wording.
Absent of being able to do that quick enough, Gwen, because
Yeah.
that meeting is tomorrow night.
I know.
I think we should definitely at least
Yeah.
do this. If we can't restructure it,
Like you should.
Yeah,
if we can't restructure it quickly, we could definitely,
One more. Okay.
yeah, we have time to submit a general
right.
letter of engage, yeah.
So I don't know how much time we want to devote to this, but,
You got 20 minutes.
okay, I think we can do that. This is a model zoning provision to make ADUs done by right on Cape Cod. They have a bunch of communities facing similar issues to us with lack of affordable housing. And they want to diversify their housing by making ADUs by right. So this is their sample. It's not really, I guess it's a zoning change, but it doesn't really do anything except say that it defines what an ADU is, things like it's not intended for sale, it's got to stay on the property. What this document basically does is just says, it makes the change that you don't have to go before the zoning board, you just go to the, in our case, building inspector,
Yep.
you file a permit like we do now to put up a fence, right? It doesn't change setbacks or anything like that. Normally, I don't like doing things incrementally like this. I would like to get into looking at all the setbacks, but I think the reality of that, from our perspective, is probably way over our head, and we'd spin a lot of wheels for little results. Normally, I've been thinking about this for about a year, and I would just submit this to the city. I would clean it up, make it relevant to us, and just submit it to a counselor to go through the process, because I'm pretty sure that the council would approve to make it by right. But I think bringing it to the committee here, maybe there's glaring problems with this that I'm not seeing, right? So what I'd like to do basically is go through line by line, and it's not as much as you think, because most of it's pretty straightforward, and just see if it applies to us, if there's something really wrong that you guys would see, and then ideally I'd come next, somebody would recraft it for submission as an ordinance. I don't know exactly what the word is for
So
a
just on
zoning
the
thing.
protocol, Jeff, I mean, is that like a petition where it would require like a dozen signatures or something?
No, it's just a piece of legislation you give to the counselor, and I'm fairly confident they generally all want ADUs by right. I don't know that for a fact.
Well, but isn't, I mean, there's a few ways, there's a citizen petition, but the planning board can always introduce any zoning change. So I don't know.
And maybe that's
And
the
a
right
counselor,
path.
no, but a counselor can as well.
Yeah, no, sure, I'm not saying
I mean, if you
I'm
had
just
a
saying what I
counselor-
would normally do.
No, but if you had a counselor that was in support of that, I guess that might be the smoothest way. Ultimately,
know.
it has to be a joint hearing regardless,
Right.
no matter the method.
Joint hearing with zoning in.
No, but what planning and city council, no matter what the form of submission is, I'm just saying, I think there's 3 ways of submitting it. It's just which is,
But I would agree with Chris that I think there's I don't know about 9 city
Sure.
councilors, but I mean, we know Tom.
The appetite's
We know
there.
Tom would be willing to bring this forward if he
Right.
was city
well, we just
council.
changed the mayor in 4 years. I don't see how we can't do this.
And I'd love to hear Jeff's take on this, because on the one hand, it effectively takes a lot of work off of planning. On the other hand, it takes a lot of overview away, right?
I think the overview taking away is fine.
Okay.
It's actually good.
Right.
I mean,
The
the point of planning is to set the table.
Right.
Yeah.
Not to pull the fork out.
I agree, it's good from my perspective too, but I just want to make sure that it's, again, I don't want to do something that has unintended consequences that are just not on my radar.
Right.
Right?
There's an interesting stipulation here. If the primary entrance of an ADU is not proposed to be shared with that of the principal dwelling, such entrance shall be less visible from the street
Yeah.
view of the principal dwelling than the main entrance of the principal dwelling.
No, I haven't edited this at all.
Where
I have issues
does
too.
where do the nuts and bolts come in as far as the side or
What's
front
visible makes sense,
setbacks or
right?
whatever?
No, you've got the
Is it
primary
in
and
this
secondary.
document usually, or is it?
No, because I think
But not
those-
necessarily.
Not
I'm
necessarily.
happy to
Side
talk about it.
conversations are not
Yeah.
helpful right now.
Yeah, so, I'm
Tell me,
sorry.
Jeff.
I just didn't know where the nuts and bolts come in, as far as, what are my side setback requirements of front, is there more detail than this document?
Yes.
Well, the way that I just skimmed it, but the way that it works is if the zoning map's up there, if you are in the R10, then this says you have to meet the R10 setback.
Yeah.
Oh,
To be
okay.
able- to
This
be able-
doesn't
and then
change
same thing with like
All right,
R40.
so you go to
Yeah.
Plan B,
Which
which is.
is what I was saying about not generally I don't like the incrementalism of it, but I think it's necessary here.
Yeah.
So if we just open the door to just just get a permit, build an accessory dwelling unit that conforms with our existing zoning,
Yeah.
I suspect that then zoning issues will start to come up where there's questions of, well, they'll go to planning and they'll try to get a special permit to like go 5 feet more than they should by zoning,
Right,
right?
right.
Right.
And at that point, it'd be a good time to look at that and say, well, can we just make a blanket change
Yeah.
or not, you know?
But usually the approach like in something like this is to create a release valve. So you want to try to get these by right, but if there's a proposal that can't meet the setbacks, then it goes back to the special permit. And that's
Right.
the stopgap. For some period of time, you would try to do that. My only observation is that the housing needs assessment did articulate trying to help with this.
Okay,
I mean, specifically, right? So like right now we're pretty close to being poised to have a consultant assist with this. And the thought process in applying for that grant was that we may need a little data. We may need to have some numbers. So like I've sat through this, I've sat with this group for almost 2 years now. And I know that there's anecdotal data that shows our housing trends and our housing supply is less than our demand. And I think the idea was that the consultant can crunch those numbers and come with a report to show formally, here's the situation. Your supply is far less than your demand. You need these kinds of housing types. So like housing for seniors, housing for people that it's attainable. And then here are the tools that you can do to unlock and create more housing. And that was the target for this. So I think there's no reason to not keep talking about this, but I think relatively soon we'll get the proposals back and have and what I added into the grant was some illustrations of what these look like, some articulation of the actual zoning requirements that most commonly come up. So like I saw 1 parking space per unit in there, and like a fence or screening between properties. And then we could take it a step further, which is what we asked the consultant to do is, assuming you get this zoning passed and it's by right, we want to have like a homeowner's guide.
yeah.
Because if you don't need to deal with zoning, then you've just eliminated a whole process.
Yep.
3 months, $350 you don't need to worry about. You can just go right to like, how do I get financing? Who do I talk to first about home equity line of credit and all this stuff, like to really just build it so that homeowners have a faster path.
So, the way I agree with everything you said. So what I had envisioned was that some, I don't know what is the word, is it an ordinance when you do a zoning change
Yes.
like this? Okay. An ordinance would be brought here that we'd all vote and agree on, hopefully. Maybe get a letter of support from the EDIC at the same time, submit it to wherever we submit it in the end. But even then, that's gonna be, 4 weeks from now. Then it's gotta go through 3 months of city council before it even comes to the city council. It's gotta go through their subcommittees. So I think that we've got a built-in time. And I suspect that city council is gonna change things that we submit anyway.
Yeah, and I think, from what I've understood of the process so far, I think maybe taking one more meeting to refine this, like you
Sure.
said. If you can get a city councilor to sponsor it, that city councilor can bring it to the city clerk and say, I'd like to submit this proposed ordinance change. It goes to the city council for the first reading, which they just then get it to the zoning subcommittee, the ordinance subcommittee.
And zoning subcommittee too. Probably have to go through both
I
at
think
some point.
so like it's a convoluted process where it has to go to the full city council, then it gets referred to the ordinance subcommittee, and then at some point, there's a decision to hold the joint public hearing with the planning board. And so you're right, I think the timeline, if you stretch it out, you're probably talking
Right.
March for an actual public hearing.
But Jeff, is it typically hammered out in advance in this kind of detail? Or does the zoning board at the end, let's say the city council / planning approves ADUs by right, would then there be another step that would say, okay, now let's hammer out the details? Or, I mean, I just want to be careful that we're not so presumptuous that we hand somebody what appears to be a completed document and they say, wait a minute, that's our job.
Well,
No, I don't think it's- yeah, I don't think it's presumptuous.
I've
You
seen
can do
this
it
zoning ordinance in
yeah.
the past, Stuart helped me, and one of them was very specific, and they made a minor change, because they have that right.
I mean, to Chris's point, if 90% of the work is done and they're just going to make a few tweaks, it's going to move it even quicker. It's
Right.
going to move it through the process
Yeah.
quicker.
Yeah, the goal would be to get it done. That's really the goal, you know?
Do you know the approximate age or date of this?
It's fairly recent. It's going through the committees now.
You know,
This is not like 2 years ago. They're working on it
Yeah.
now.
Oh, it's not in place yet,
No.
out on the Cape?
The only thing I would add to it, in the beginning, or the only thing I would add to consider, not to add to, when it says that this model does not include an owner occupancy requirement for either the principal or accessory dwelling, and when you can read for yourself, and I understand that. I think there has to be a small discussion regarding Airbnb.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, see, it comes up again here.
does.
It says
I would personally change that because I think we need Airbnb.
No, but I know, but see, when it comes down to it, Airbnb, like where Airbnb is, one of the flashpoints of Airbnb is in areas where it's being restricted, but then in other areas it's not. So like, it's the creation of party houses. That's what you want to just. I'm not against Airbnb, but you just don't want to have you don't want to have it such, and then maybe this needs to be flushed out in the detail part of the process. But 5 years ago, Airbnb wasn't discussed.
Yep.
That's all I'm getting at.
So let's flush it out.
I was going to say, but maybe not here and now. Or do we want to use this time to go all the way through this and make the recommendations?
I think it's quicker than you think.
I just want to go back to
Okay.
something you said. I mean, the very first line says all 15 Cape towns have adopted zoning that allows dwelling units accessory.
Yeah,
sounds
we
like-
have two, but not by right.
Right.
So, we've got zoning that allows accessory ADUs,
My special permit.
but you have to do it by
By
permit.
special permit.
Process suggestion, and I know you're anxious to push this through, but I would like the opportunity to read it
Okay.
carefully. My neighborhood would be heavily affected by this. It's a street neighborhood with big lots, so.
That's perfect. If we all take this back and then come next meeting
That's what I suggested.
with notes on each bullet point,
Absolutely.
like Dave says, there's a bullet point, not a bullet point, there's a summary point that says not less than 30 days may something be rented, which eliminates Airbnb. Like, that's something that I'll change, right? And so if we all make these changes, then we can reconcile them next meeting even quicker.
And Dave, just thinking really quickly back to something Chris had said in his presentation last month. I mean, if I'm going to put one of these in my side yard and then entertain Airbnb, I don't know that it's going to become a party house because it's a pretty expensive party house.
Yeah.
You're right. What's happened in some areas is investors have bought the primary house.
Right.
So I was focusing on the language that says you can't enforce owner occupied.
Okay.
So,
Well, what I heard in Chris's model is it's gonna, I think Chris's model forces owner occupied. And they're gonna, in effect, your home becomes a two-family home.
Yeah.
And they've got to be sold together. You can't,
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Right.
you can't sell one or the other. You gotta sell
No,
this
they-
package.
Yeah.
No, they share utilities or
Sewer systems
yeah.
and,
Well, then, it begs the question as to, is this level of detail needed? Because I'm sure that our zoning already says that a rental can't, maybe it doesn't, but probably should say a rental can't be rented for less than X amount of days, which actually it probably doesn't if we've got Airbnbs in the city. So it begs the question of, do we even want to get into this level of detail, or just simply have an ordinance that says ADUs can be done by filing a permit with the building inspector and
So
call it a day?
here's my recommendation. I think that we should take the time to read through this. I would value, as an action step after this meeting, if you would write up a couple of prompt questions that we should think about
Okay.
as we read through this. We can each make our own notes however we want, digitally, on paper, it doesn't matter, and use some of those questions and have a more informed discussion the next time.
Okay.
Does that sit well with the rest of you?
Sure.
are the comments in this document, are they your comments or did they come
No, they're
from the
not my
Cape?
comments.
They appear to
Okay.
be from the Cape.
Yeah.
Are they,
This was pulled out of committee
do you have a
from,
soft copy or just hard copy?
I've got a soft copy.
Okay, because we,
I'll forward it.
once we get that all done, we can, I mean, don't forward to me now, but once we get all our edits, then we can just use that to update.
We'll just share it out with maybe meeting minutes and the prompt questions.
Okay.
Cool?
So I think just one final observation is that I would encourage the group, and I'm including myself, to not, I don't think, it may not give enough protections if it doesn't come with some criteria. And
So the one line.
yeah, they're called performance standards, and so I think that that's where this becomes manageable to hand to the building inspector, and I think we have to envision public hearing process. So I think, as Cassie said, like, not everyone will, some people will have concerns about, well, what about if this goes in my back, like in my neighbor's backyard? So the idea of performance standards is they're easy to show on a plan, and they're easy to say it got implemented, and they're kind of give some parameters by which this would happen. So setbacks.
Where do we find all that
shrubs,
setback information?
It's in some section of the zoning that talks about the dimensional requirements. So it's set forth for like each of the
So we
districts.
go to the city website and look in.
It's different for each district.
So,
Yeah.
Chris,
Yes.
could I ask you to pull together a set of useful resources and questions that would
yes.
help us think about
Yeah.
this, that might include the zoning for the city, that we could refer to for our own
Yeah.
neighborhoods, for neighborhoods of interest?
I have a few documents that I've been compiling for.
One other thought, if I might,
Wow.
because what was going through my head was the two, and maybe there's more than two, but the reasons why someone might do this, and if I look at the first section A here, A and B, are basically summarize the two reasons why you might do it, but the one thing that I would suggest doesn't make a lot of sense to me is add moderately priced rental units to the housing stock. If you look at the cost of the ADU, and if someone's looking to use it as an investment, it's not going to be moderately priced.
Okay, so I
cost
think
of
that that's a,
Yeah.
I think we need to
So-
table this conversation right now,
Yeah.
because I have other things that
Okay.
I want to get there, and it's my meeting. And you all have to do it.
You see,
So, I would say, use that comment as you're thinking through this.
Let me just answer that, okay?
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, no, that's fine, it will be. The cost of the ADUs that we've been presented are in fact in line with what you're saying, but I don't think that it has to be that expensive.
Okay.
And those are for fully live-alone buildings that aren't attached. I think there's plenty of ways to turn attic space into ADUs,
Okay.
make an
And
extension.
again, all I was getting at is if you took what Chris was giving as a model, you plot that in your backyard, you're going to be looking at about a $1,200 monthly rent.
Okay.
I
make
think
it
that's an
work.
expensive
Yeah.
solution.
Okay, so I would like to see that some of those thoughts are reflected in the comments that you have as you're reading through this document, so that it's not lost to time that we said these things aloud here. Okay. It got sent out later than expected. Did folks have a chance to review the planning board application? And I'm gonna stop myself right there. Mo has joined us. Welcome, Mo. Glad you're here. Nice to see you.
Thank you for being patient.
That's fine. And in an unconventional move, I have invited a member of the public to join us here at the table because he previously expressed interest in coming. He might be interested in doing some subcommittee work with us. Who knows? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Bryce Lloyd Hahn, resident kind of off of Pleasant Street, renter, and I'm currently a student at UMass Amherst in the Graduate School for Landscape Architecture and Regional Planning, and have an interest in all things pertinent to this. This, I think, is in line and want to have an input in the city in some way or another. And I don't think that identity of a student and that are exclusive. So yeah, excited to sort of listen in right here.
Maybe you'd like an internship.
Spell your last name.
Yes, LLOYD hyphenated HAHN.
Thank you.
Picking up where we left off, planning board application. Did folks have a chance to review that short planning board application from the current owners of Bavaric Design and some of their partners?
Before we get, were we going to close the loop on the letter of support for?
Oh, yeah, good call, good call. I think some of the language in this I might just pirate
Just
and
add
add as
a paragraph that
reasons
just
for general
says-
support and say, incidentally, this thing happening on 8 Mayor Street is a great example of this, but we are generally in favor.
Yeah,
Yeah?
yeah.
Okay. Does anybody want to have their own last pass of the draft that I create subsequent to this meeting? You trust me?
Trust you.
You did this to yourselves. Okay. Great. Do we need to vote on that? Dave Boyle, do we have to vote to that to submit the letter once it's revised?
Under.
I wrote that we needed to, but-
You have the word vote.
I did, but
bold.
that's based on not knowing whether we had to.
I'll just,
I like to
I'll just move to vote.
over-anticipate.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
I
it's,
second.
that, yeah,
It's always better to do that.
Great.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Then you don't have to worry about it.
What were you gonna say? Were you gonna say something different, Dave?
consensus is fine.
Okay.
No, on letters of
We don't need to
support,
vote.
no, Robert
Right.
Rules Order is a chairperson,
Yeah,
we're not legislative anyway,
right.
so.
I think it's good, I think it'll be good practice, we'll test it with the planning board, one, but to vote to authorize the chair to write the letter on behalf of the whole committee. I mean, I think that's the gist of what you want to try to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So do we have a motion to approve the submission of this letter once revised to the zoning board of appeals?
So that's something
The
second.
second?
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All against? Any abstentions? Any further discussion?
No.
Great. Planning board. Did we read it?
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, cool.
yes.
So we have the opportunity, or not, to decide to submit a letter of support for this business to the planning board. We could decide, if this is a worthwhile discussion, to hold some places in our meetings for future applications and have a stronger, more advocative role for upcoming businesses. So, I guess to get the discussion going, what was your perception of how that application adds to the variety of options or business types in that neighborhood? What are your preliminary thoughts?
I thought it was very well put together,
Okay.
and it looks like they really got their stuff together. I think it's a good addition to Easthampton.
Uh-huh.
My question is, are we going to do this for every new potential resident?
I've got the same question,
I
and
also have the same
I have
question.
a question of why.
Mhm.
So, does planning ever turn these projects down?
Well, it's in such a nuance, I have to nuance this answer a couple different ways. This one in particular is a site plan approval, which just implies that it's normal and expected. And that in theory, the planning board really should not deny this. They might be able to put a condition on it, or they might be able to talk about what they're gonna do with their trash, but it's really kind of, it's the next step up from by right. It's allowed with a site plan approval. which means
So
you can
basically,
see
they're
the-
saying this is what we want to do, are we breaking any rules here?
Correct.
Okay.
Right, so, and then it's different from a special permit. So a special permit is discretionary, where it doesn't happen very often, but the planning board or the ZBA with a special permit could come through the public hearing process and find that the proposal is totally flawed, and they could deny it.
Okay.
Whereas in this case, site plan approval is generally not that.
I have seen planning board meetings where a member has said, have we heard from EDIC and how they feel about this? So I'm not so sure if it's
Are you
a bad thing to have
Are you
that.
being facetious? Or?
No,
Really?
I've heard them ask if it's gone, and I don't know if that's a delay tactic, Chris, or if it's
Okay.
simply, but have we heard anything, has EDIC weighed in on this? So,
Our mission
there you
is
go.
to support and enhance the economic environment.
Yep.
So if we take that as our broad mission, we have it on our opportunities list that we could review planning board applications in an advisory capacity, just to say, hey, great idea. I hear you on the question, would we do this with every application? That is beyond the pale, that is not something we can do. So we would have to come up with a way that we would decide the things that we're going to spend time discussing and advising.
are there that many?
Well, there has been. I mean, I think that this structure has not been in place. I've been in this position just about 2 years, and I would say that there were probably some proposals that you would have loved to seen, and I would imagine say, this is great, or what a reinvestment in Easthampton. You know, like to really promote people taking charge and contributing to what's going on in Easthampton. And I think that there will be a few along the way that are going to be controversial, and it could be, it could be a role for this group to play. The idea that we had was, when I receive an application, I have to transmit it out. I send it by email with a link to all the city officials, and it goes to the Conservation Commission through the conservation agent. So it is something that is relatively easy to include the chairperson in that, and then it would be an action to forward to this group. And then you decide at your meeting whether it's something that you would want to comment on or not. I mean, it's something to test. It's definitely an additional function of this group.
I mean, I would just say let's do them all until you find it's too much, and then we can figure out what criteria to place.
And it can be pretty standard form letter in a sense, because to Gwen's point, if you look at our mission, we'd be hard pressed to find a business that's looking to come in Easthampton that we wouldn't support.
Right.
I mean,
And we might have good ideas, like, it'd be great if you did this.
Yeah, I mean, my first concern is where are they going to get the employees and where are those employees going to live? Because that's an
Right.
issue that we're all having, is that we're creating all these new restaurants,
right.
but there aren't restaurant workers that live
Yeah.
in town.
Right.
And
They're all
so
commuting, yeah.
Obviously, you know this better than most.
But it's not a bad problem to have.
Right, I know
You what it
Mission,
is.
that was their delay reason,
Right.
they couldn't find good workers.
Because they just opened up another
It's a very interesting
one.
point, Casey,
Yeah.
because they explicitly bring it up in this application that they want their employees to live and be able to, like, ride their bike and walk to
Yeah,
work.
you notice that.
You know what I'm saying? It's people will figure it out,
Sure.
but it's just the hard thing now in all the restaurants in town are staffing.
Well,
Interesting.
globally, nationally, we're in an economic situation right now where there are more jobs than there are people looking for jobs. And that doesn't happen very often, but it's, I forget the number, millions of jobs more than there are people looking for jobs nationally. So it's
Yeah.
hitting home here.
Okay.
My thought when I saw this was, I don't mind being supportive of any proposal before the planning board, that's inappropriate. But if we had to make a threshold, this one wouldn't meet it because of the fact that it's site plan approval
Okay.
and that they're more or less going to be approved with possibly a condition or two. I mean, it just, if you had 10 applications and you're going to weed out 2 of them, you would weed out the 2 site plan approvals procedurally. That's all I want to mention.
Okay.
Because there's no vote, when you need a special permit, you need a supermajority, and that's when there's okay, the rubber's meeting the road, we're gonna make some decisions here, that's all. I don't mind being supportive of it at all.
Okay. Mo,
Yes,
tell me your thoughts, please.
we're talking about the new restaurant.
The Poke Bowl
Yeah, and so,
proposal.
I'm sorry, I came in halfway through this conversation.
That's
So
okay.
what's the controversy?
No.
that
There
we're-
isn't any.
No.
Yeah.
We're really
Just
questioning,
reviewing.
should we submit a letter of support for this restaurant, or should we just not say anything?
You know, I don't know that it's a bad thing, you know, but I do think that perhaps over time, I think we need to have some criteria to say, okay, I mean, do we want to keep doing this for everything that comes along? Or maybe we do, you know?
Well,
We just
well,
need to define that, I
I
think.
was gonna say that also, along those lines, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I think it's a positive thing, you know, if we're gonna do a letter of support and it just shows business in general,
Yeah.
that we're all business friendly
Yeah.
and we want them here. And we're gonna work, we're gonna support them and figure out what we need to do to get.
Right, and it also shows the business that EDIC exists,
Yeah.
and they can come to us with a question, and
Yep.
then that we know of
I
that.
was gonna ask if we do this for every potential one coming in, does that lessen our impact? Or does we say, oh, EDIC will approve it anyway, so like we kind of expect that.
And does it create a mechanism by which people would delay something, waiting for us to deliberate and decide on an individual business?
Well, on a special permit application, sometimes you have to go to all boards, and I think it's a matter of how the planning board looks at it. But I mean, years ago, when I submitted an application, it had to go to, you know, the Conservation Commission, the Board of Health. The attitude was at that time, if there was no response, that was a positive response. You know, like, if things were submitted timely, and the Board of Health had 3 weeks to look at it, and they had no response, there was no need to wait for their response.
So,
You know what I'm saying? I mean, but I don't know what the planning board's flavor at the moment is.
I mean, I think that in this case, it would not prevent the planning board from taking an action. I think it's not a statutorily required, you know, review. So it's just something to, I think the idea is to show general support for new businesses coming to Easthampton. I don't know if that's, I think the
Yeah.
broader discussion is whether that's a role that this group wants to play.
Yeah.
moving
Well,
forward.
I think personally, it feels like it would be a role that we want to play. And I think also too, by submitting a letter of support, we're indicating willingness to work with other committees and show support for them as well. Either,
And I don't,
you know, whether we have a suggestion to the contrary or not, but I think it's also good
Good
for.
marketing.
and I don't think we
Well,
have to make this
team
letter
playing.
of support
Yeah.
global. I don't think by doing this means we have to do everyone coming in the future. We can still cherry pick, I think, for whatever reason, the ones that are a no-brainer. This might be in that category, but the ones that are no-brainer, if we're silent on them, they're gonna go through. I'm thinking what Jeff said a moment ago about some that come down the road that might be controversial.
Well, and are
We might even be asked to show up at the meeting to speak
Well,
on behalf,
and
not
are we
just a letter.
prepared and willing to do that? Which, that's our job perhaps.
Well,
Well, I think at some point it's case by case. I mean, you know.
it depends, I guess, how
Well, I
much
mean-
controversy you want to get into.
Proposal A, and
But
if we
if
don't
you're
have
gonna-
consensus, that's what it is. We don't have consensus.
Right.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so you probably already answered this, but just for clarity's sake, because it's not my wheelhouse. If the site plan is approved, that's it, they just start.
They still need building
Aside
permits.
from
Yeah,
building
yeah,
permits and stuff,
yeah.
okay.
I mean, it's easy to be supportive when it's easy.
Right.
True.
Yeah.
And just how much gumption and will do we have?
Yeah.
when it's not
I
so
mean,
much.
I think,
And I don't want to seem like I'm not supporting it at all. I just want our letters to carry some weight.
Yep, I
mean-
totally get it.
I just look at the full cycle, you know, us in Northampton, and so, you know, Northampton's losing its restaurant, you know, draw. Then do we say, if somebody, you know, if East Hampton's got to that point, like, well, we shouldn't have any more restaurants? But then isn't that capitalism? Capitalism is, you know,
Yeah.
survival of the fittest and
Well,
competition
can we
and.
actually even do that? can we actually even do that if
You know, but it's sort of like if we,
But if they are following the rules and they fit within the
Right.
zoning, and they fit
You can't
within,
restrict it.
you
That's
can't
what I
say,
mean.
no, you can't come.
That's right.
that's what I mean, it's,
That's why we had 5 comic book stores and 5 tattoo parlors, because you couldn't, and look how many are left today.
yeah,
1 or 2, right?
yeah. So it's sort of like, how do we say no to somebody, you know, whether it has to be,
I don't think we have the right to do that.
Well, it's not us who would say no.
Well, right, so it's
No,
not
okay,
us
right.
who would be doing that.
it's just
and
either a
it's-
letter
I
support
think
or
it-
non-letter support?
I think it's a
Yeah,
letter
okay.
of support, or we say nothing,
No,
Or there's no involvement.
right?
I mean,
Like, I don't feel
Sales
like
are-
we have to go out of our way to be like, absolutely not, under no circumstances. Our goal is to be asset-based, we are here to support and
Yeah,
enhance.
but like anything else, if we thought something, some project was not good for the community at large, we have the right to say
I
that.
think you do.
We
Or at
do
least
have the
mitigate
right.
it, like,
We
so
do.
would
I
you
know, so we have to
consider-
exercise it, but we, you know,
I don't think that it's a situation where each time something comes to our attention, we have to decide, do we write a letter in favor, do we write a letter against, do we say nothing? I think we can generally approach it as, we think this is great and we'll support it, or we're gonna be quiet because it's probably fine and it's not getting us terribly jazzed. In those, I hope, rare-ish moments when we're like, this does not seem to the benefit of our community, we can write something on.
Well, you're writing a letter of support for a ZBA application for housing. I mean, I think you want to take a little bit broader view, which is, this isn't easy, this is a practice run. The next
Yeah.
couple are probably going to be practice runs, but let's say there's a significant housing development proposal. And we know that most people, well, not all people go to those meetings and give high fives and say this is the
Right.
best thing. And so you will have a voice that could be potentially useful
And strong.
to help. So we're gonna have a housing needs assessment that you guys are gonna be involved with. And if there's a housing proposal, you could use the letter platform to say, you know, based on the data collected last year, you know, we need housing. This is a good application. Maybe it needs to be fine tuned, but we'd like to support it.
Yep.
You know, I think.
And
it-
maybe give some like 3 bullet
Right,
points.
sure.
And this backs up our
Yeah.
decision.
But that's an example of something that could be controversial.
Yeah.
Right.
And that we'd be there in a room full of controversy in support of this.
Depending.
Right.
But it could also be a point where we bullet point something like, it'd be, you know, in better language, but it'd be great if you had more affordable housing. The demand is here for that, and here's why, you know? Because if the developer sees that the EDIC has facts supporting that their business venture will succeed, it has some weight.
Yeah, and I can give another, so I don't mean to belabor this, but there would be some potential value for this committee over the next 12 months to see the number and types of applications coming in.
That's
Because I
true.
think
Yeah.
it's something that, I've heard this before, and it's not necessarily from anyone at the table, but like, wow, I didn't know that was happening. You know, and you're on a committee where you're committing time to economic development and promoting Easthampton, and you could see these projects coming in. And there's gonna be some that you may not choose to provide any input on, and that's fine, or at least, if nothing else, I wanna build the process where you know what's happening. Cause I think an example like this, in the future, when I have a slightly more time, or maybe 10 interns, you know, I think that there's a concept here with this site plan approval for a restaurant where there's no parking requirements.
Yep.
Because they're not adding any space. Why does it even have to come to the planning board? You know, in a lot of municipalities,
that's music to my ears.
but that's a potential, you know, input on this community to remove a barrier
Right.
for these people. So in North Adams, we were talking about that, like, so they have a mill, and every mill tenant, no matter how big or small, needs to go to the planning board. And I was like, so what does the planning board talk about? And they're like, well, sometimes signs, and like, do they talk about parking? Not really. And I'm like, well, you know, we are at least trying to like remove the barriers. And so I think seeing a repetitive application like this for a restaurant that's a change in use, that's site plan approval, and there's no changes other than signs, you know, we could save them $100 in 2 months.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like,
you know.
anecdotally, I
Right.
opened up a spot in Amherst many years ago now. Maybe I broke the law, but I just did it.
Well, Amherst has the leeway where if you're not changing anything to the exterior of a building, then you can change use. So there's some value to seeing the applications come forward and then maybe making a decision.
I think you had said a while ago that you could submit, when those are coming to your attention, you could submit them to the chair.
Correct.
Just for her to be aware
Right.
that.
I think that's
And
exciting.
you could put it on the agenda for potential
Well, I
review
think
or,
that
you
that's,
know.
also not to belabor the point, but that's an interesting question. Should we work on that as well when we do the ADUs by right? Because that's a significant, 2 months, you said?
Yeah.
That's a significant barrier to open a restaurant.
Well, what does it take to make that change that you just referenced?
It's a zoning change, zoning ordinance change. I think, but I think getting a little bit of examples, so I think it's unfortunate that we hadn't done this in the past year because there's been 3 of these that have had to go to the planning board to show that actually I'm not doing anything significant on the planning board. It's like, why is this here? You know, kind of thing.
So, 2 things. One, this could lead us to a larger set of questions that we could advise the city on, like change this practice. 2, I think there are 3 things. Do we want to even consider writing a letter of support this time around? 3, should we think about maybe soon or maybe later, not really sure, a smaller group of us coming up with what criteria would help us decide how we choose to support or not?
Well, if this is gonna, if this is a prime example of something that wouldn't even come to the planning board in the future, then why would EDIC's vote of support or lack thereof make a difference? Because they can almost do it by right.
Well, that's a good
Yeah.
point, yeah.
So what, I think the ones that are more controversial, where the planning board does have to make a decision whether or not to allow this, is where we want to weigh in.
Okay.
That's my gut.
But
So-
there's one question we might want to look at down the road. In the downtown business zone, site plan approval is required when there's a change of use. So I've always been against that. I remember Stuart and I argue about it. I think that downtown business district is business. So the vaping shop, which to me was less desirable, was a business. Now you have another business going there. I'd like to see us maybe look at eliminating that part of the zoning.
Right, yeah.
You know, just, so they go get a permit, they have to meet all their safety, you know, and we don't get involved in that.
Right.
You know.
And-
Okay.
So
So-
that's actually just a topic of, you know, continued discussion about that section of the zoning in the downtown
Yeah.
business district.
But I think it's an
That's something
important
we should
topic,
add
though.
to a future meeting's
Yeah.
agenda.
So based on what I heard, I would recommend not writing a letter at this point, but let me,
Agreed.
if you would be agreeable, let me keep transmitting
Yep.
planning board applications through you and at least put them to the committee so you can see what's coming. And
And if you think there's those that are coming to the planning board that are going to border, I hate to use the word controversial because it sounds bigger, but the ones that you think we really should be paying attention to, writing a letter, potentially showing up at a meeting, maybe if you could note that to Gwen when you send it, that, hey, this is one that I think is gonna have a tough time getting through for whatever reason. Maybe we should really hammer that one out in a meeting and decide if it's a letter, if we agree that it's a good thing.
Okay.
I think
So-
that's good criteria.
I agree. And to be clear, this is something that we do not have a recent history of doing as a committee. It would add to the things that I think we care about, and I think would need to change the way we think about how we conduct our business. So
And-
just heads up.
And to your third question on criteria, I
Yeah.
think that'll become evident. I don't think we need to hash that out until we
I
start
think
seeing a
that's down
reason
the
to
road.
hash it out.
Yep.
Okay.
Jeff,
Okay.
have you heard anything about the guy that wants to put the pool hall across from the Eastworks?
No, I heard that there was someone who wanted to put a pool hall in Eastworks. So
The lease negotiations fell through, and he's looking to buy the property across the way and put up a steel frame building and put something there.
We
But
got pool here in River City.
The one that's the,
By the road.
the Peter Pan license.
but when you say pool hall though, you say across from Eastworks, that's the
Old gas station.
DP site,
Yeah,
Yeah.
center deposit,
is that cleaned up?
95%, according to the listing, that's all I know.
95%, is that 5%?
Well, it's gone through a process, you know. it's-
All right, I love this conversation so much, and it's not on the agenda.
Well,
And it's Gwen's
And that's-
meeting. And it's Gwen's
It's my meeting.
But I think that example of someone building a new structure and
Ah, there's the tie-in. Thank
Yes.
you. You may continue.
that it's going to be potentially one of those controversial ones.
Right.
It's,
Okay.
it's on potential wetland areas.
Oh, I see.
Oh, wow.
Sliding slope.
And I'm not sure what the finances
Slippery
are
sliding
behind the visuals of the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, is it just
Okay, so
Could-
that's something we
you
keep
know
our
what I
eyes
mean?
peeled for.
So it's one of those things where I think if you'd heard about it, you'd give us more details. All I heard was watching the licensing board.
Sure.
He looking for the extension on the license, and Kelly sort of like telling him you need to get your ducks in a row because there's a lot of unanswered questions.
Oh, okay.
Well, you can get a lot from watching meetings. I will be constrained to those that have made an application and are public documents.
Yeah.
I'll be constrained to that, but yeah, if you can
Okay.
gather a lot by watching certain meetings. But yeah, I won't be able to front load stuff that's like
Sure.
in theory, but I think
But that you made
it's a
that-
good example. If they came forward with a planning board application, then that would be one that they changed the character of the area or
Very good.
could be awesome. Like
Yeah.
you never
Yeah,
know. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Casey. Sorry for calling out. Okay, I want to give Cassie and Josh a little bit of time to lead a discussion about vacant storefronts and houses. So I'm going to front load a short thing about the fact that I've invited Jana Tetro and Jackie Brousseau Pereira to come to our December meeting as representatives of the Fair Housing Partnership. We have a couple of ideas that we could talk about with them, including the housing needs assessment. By then, we should have some proposals back. We may already have a consultant in the works by then, so we could talk about that with them. I think this ADUs thing is probably something that we can also talk about with them. I think just creating a more consistent relationship with other committees that have shared interests is to everybody's benefit. So if you have topics that you think would be ripe for a conversation with those two, it's gonna be an action step, I'm gonna start using that phrase a lot more, that I will solicit those from you so that they can be added to an agenda for December 17th, okay?
So just a point of clarification. So
Yes.
they would be good to CC on my informational packet that I give for ADUs.
Yeah.
Is that improper if I email the committee and then CC other people? Is that frowned upon?
We're not having a conversation about it
Okay.
in email, you're giving them information,
All right.
And that's public
yeah.
information once it's in.
Yep.
I mean, the only thing I would add is the safest bet would be to email it to the chair
Right.
Okay.
and let the chair
Yeah, have me do it.
distribute
That's-
it. Or like, so, yeah. If it comes from Chris to Jana, like at least get it to the, yeah. Whether it needs to go from Chris to you to Jana, but
Sure.
try to, the communicating through the
Yep.
chairperson is
Chair.
Yep,
kind of like, that's a key thing
Safest.
to eliminate a
yep,
little
use me
bit
as
of
the
the
node.
potential for someone to reply all.
Jackson's, and the other one was named, I can include it.
I wrote a note to you that I needed to depart at 5.
Ciao,
So, all right,
picnics.
thank you. This is
Were your
great,
kids?
great conversation. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
right.
almost made it the whole time. All right.
job.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Cassie, would you like to lead us off?
Sure.
So we have, just heads up, we have 18 minutes, 17 minutes before we officially close.
And this is primarily going to be Kathy.
It's fine.
'cause my findings were very limited.
Okay,
Okay, so this is basically a summary of the document that I distributed. It was done by consultants for the city of Cambridge, and they listed different strategies that are in place in different locations. And there are a couple that are more interesting than others, or at least to me they were. I thought intercept surveys are really interesting. You walk up to somebody who's in the neighborhood or whatever, by a vacant place, what would you like to see here? And then they fill out a survey and drop it in the box. You leave a pile of them at City Hall, at Dunkin' Donuts, whatever, in proximity to the vacant storefront. So I thought that was kind of an interesting concept. And they do that in Cambridge. In Minneapolis, they use Hood Starter, which is a website where patients, wrong.
different world, Cassie.
Different world, where people literally log onto the website, they see where the vacant property is, they can click on it and say, I want to see a Burger King here. Or they identify what kind of business they want to see in that location.
So it's an online intercept
Yeah,
survey.
so it's kind of interesting ways of gathering public input on what to put there. these are, there's some other ideas here. I'm very aware of the time limitations. There are vacant property registration ordinances in these locations, and there's also a website that tracks them and keeps track of ones that are coming up and being implemented and where they are in the process. Pardon me. You can see basically the premise is across the board that there's a registration fee when you have a vacant storefront. So I'm going to pretend I have one. And so I would have to pay the city $400. If I don't pay them, I'm going to get assessed some kind of fee. They all have punishments for not complying with the registration fee. They all pretty much have a requirement that you keep your property in good order, that you don't let vermin take it over, or birds, or weeds, whatever. I personally like that one. What I found intriguing, I don't know if we do this in Easthampton, I don't think so. Put up a sign saying whose property it is and how to get a hold of them. I liked that.
I like that a lot. Yeah, exactly.
And also, like, you've got a broken window, I'm going to call you and tell you, you need to fix this, bud. So I liked that idea. Some towns give exemptions if you are in financial hardship, or if that's about the only reason. Oh, one town is that if you display public art, they'll give you a waiver from the fee. Apparently, managing installations of public art is a logistical nightmare, which I wouldn't have thought, but you really needed to get a sponsor.
Kids like to climb and stuff.
But there was one in Arlington, I think it's interesting, if you board up, and some towns don't allow boarding up at all, that it could be only temporary and it must match the color scheme. And thus, Arlington, if anybody's ever been there. And that's pretty much, those are kind of the highlights of it.
This is awesome.
It's incredible.
Cassie does very good homework.
Oh, thank
I will
you. So I guess the question for the group is, are there any we'd like to recommend putting forward? I love the name and telephone number requirement. One city, Washington, it has to be green. It's a city issued sign. So, like, you are definitely a deadbeat.
Well, regarding the sign for like, there's presently a requirement, I think it's a Board of Health, it's a state health code requirement for residential properties. There has to be a sign for the owner or the property management firm.
Really?
They're usually small, and but so this property is managed by ABC company, and I mean that's out there as it is. I'm just saying.
That's right, I've seen those. Yep.
My only question going through all this stuff is, and I think it's a little bit of semantics, but I want to be clear. When you say you have a vacant storefront, that's not the same as saying you have a vacant property, and like.
That's true.
Correct.
We had that example of the I place on Main Street.
Right.
That conversation.
And they define, every town takes great pains to define what their vacant property is.
I'm gonna ask, me as a property owner of commercial space, I'm not gonna pay $1,000 every time I get a vacant storefront.
Right, I think we'd have to hammer out like
It's not gonna
vacant
do
means
it.
6 months, 3
Yeah.
months.
Exactly.
something
Yeah,
like
and
that.
these all
But
have
if
pretty
it goes vacant for a
specific
year,
descriptions of
Right.
what counts as
Exactly.
a temporary vacancy, a long-term
So, but I'm saying,
vacancy.
if I have a building with 3 offices and 2 are rented, but 1 is vacant for a year, I don't think that's the same as the spirit of this. This is supposed to be against blight
Right.
and
Right.
disuse and other things, and like Lowell was hit hard in the 2008 recession.
Yes.
Especially with residential. I mean, it was abused by the banks. That's one reason why they had $1,000 was, the idea was for the banks to start unloading properties that they were holding on to.
So when I read through the 28 pages, and I did do my homework,
Ooh, I'm impressed.
I was a little bit conflicted, and I think I'm piggybacking what Dave's saying a bit, which is a desire to clean up, get some of these properties where they should be versus placing another financial burden on a business owner who's already got a financial burden of paying taxes, utilities, and on an empty storefront. So they're already, in other words, I think I might be saying the same thing Dave did, but there are empty storefronts around that you can see the owners actively trying to rent it. So there's a big sign in the front,
Right.
Yeah.
Taylor Agency for rent.
Yeah.
And then there's others who are not.
As opposed to, and I apologize throwing out names, I'm not trying to, but as opposed to the Hurry and Scurry building or the Moriarty building.
Yep, we all know.
So there's,
Well, even like Northampton, Spoletos. I mean,
right, exactly.
6 years.
Right,
I mean,
so, but you have to be careful about,
Right.
and not, I wouldn't use the word ordinance, but you know what I mean, a process that's gonna broad brush everyone when you're trying to bullet one or two.
We
So
can
can-
create our own.
We can.
And
The article that was, that 28-page one, I thought it led with some exceptional nuance and closed with exceptional nuance, saying there are lots of reasons why things end up vacant for shorter and longer term periods, and one size fits all is not a thing for this
Exactly, and
problem.
I saw that,
And it wouldn't be.
Cambridge talked about how diverse this document actually had to be at the end of the day because there were so many nuances to the whole thing. But there's a big difference between Dave having an empty storefront for 6 months and actively trying to rent it
Sure.
versus the Hurry and Scurry building.
Well, but that's what we're saying. We wouldn't have a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
And we're not suggesting that there'd be a
and
one-size-fits-all.
also,
If anybody's ever been on unemployment, I'm proud to say I've been on unemployment. And I had to prove every week that I was actively
Right.
job seeking.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
you know, why not
no,
apply that?
and I understand that the intentions, the spirit, guiding us, I'm in agreement. But I also worry about, you know, my brother and sister and I own a bunch of properties, so we have the resources to work at it. Some people only own one little building.
Yep.
You know, 1 2-family, or, you know, two apartments and 1 store, and it's just harder for them. They don't have any, you know,
And those are the ones, Dave, where I made some notes about, you know, the stakeholder outreach, where either the chamber or other organizations might provide assistance to someone who may not even know, other than a phone call to a realtor, how do I attract, who do I call to attract tenants?
Yeah.
What are the resources that might be available to me to attract tenants? If I'm simply calling a local realtor, that might not be enough.
Yeah.
Maybe there are other outreach programs I could dovetail with that reach out to other communities that might, you know, businesses leaving downtown Northampton, maybe Easthampton's very attractive. They talked about a small business liaison. That's, you know, that's way down the road because that's like probably a paid city position.
Intern.
But it's along the lines of that idea that we've had previously about when we floated it as EDIC that could start thinking about this, but creating and maintaining stronger connections to the business owners in our community and thinking about how we can Easthamptonize and humanize this process of trying to run your business and find tenants and make sure that your storefront is occupied.
And I guess the other thing that I thought of when was, if the Hurry and Scurry building and the Moriarty building weren't there, would we even have this discussion?
Probably not.
So we're really narrowly focused on a couple of, it's almost blight. It's
Right.
almost
It is blight.
Yeah.
It is, and well, I think we can write this into it. You know, if you have weeds growing, if you have clearly no activity.
No, but Moriarty does take you know, care of that property and mows it all the time. It just you know.
Have you walked the hood?
I work next door.
I know you do,
But I see him mowing out.
They take care of it. They mow the lawn, but you wouldn't want to go inside the building.
No, there's
Or
no.
look in the drive-through. That's just disgusting.
Yeah, you don't want to go in the building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but I also think that there's, to that point though, there are folks who care about their property. There are people who care about attracting folks to either rent or purchase. And then there are folks who could care less.
Yeah.
I mean, if you
Well, it's
look
nuanced. I mean, that's what we're saying.
Right.
We're not, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all.
If you look at the Union Street property where the barber shop is, next door to the barber shop has been a revolving door of businesses.
Quickly too.
And,
But people are trying.
but
Yes.
absolutely, as soon as
Yeah.
somebody moves, he's putting up a sign for rent, he's got.
That's not who we're addressing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
What if we had a program for handling such blighted properties, which individual properties would have to be recommended by a governing body to be submitted into the program, by which then fines may be applicable or other measures may be applicable. Maybe the EDIC even would recommend certain things.
I think it's a smaller process as opposed to the big scale thing, and like you said, if we are talking basically about 2 pieces of property, maybe we'd work on a blight ordinance as opposed to, vacancy issues.
But I think that the blight ordinance would include this, sort of like, if there's an ordinance, there has to be a penalty, there has to be teeth to it, and so this stuff would be the teeth.
But I think there's some triggers, like if power is shut off, willfully, either being disconnected or out of service, then the building is becoming dormant.
Yeah.
And then, when a building
It's
is...
becoming a hazard.
Well, yeah, no, as soon as a building becomes dormant, it loses its soul and its life, seriously. It deteriorates right away. And so there's triggers, and these people aren't going to keep power on just to avoid this kind of stuff.
Although one thing that triggered a thought when Casey was talking about that was, if you put something in place that tries to address blight, granted we're talking about the 2, but it's also going to look at the future. There could be 2 more 5 years from now.
Yep.
Or for whatever. So it's going to cover what we're dealing with today, but potentially cover anything that fits that category in the future.
Well, and right now we're only dealing with 2 because things are healthy, right? At the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think this is an outstanding intellectual exercise to see how others have done it and to look at, oh, what an interesting way of thinking about what those teeth could be. And what would you like to propose for how we move forward?
Is the committee generally supportive of something like this with all the nuance of the conversation that we've had about customization? If yes, then I can take it to the next level.
Okay.
If not, then...
And Cassie, take it to the next level, you mean customize it a little bit more?
Yeah, like put some meat on it.
Yeah, I like that
I'm
idea.
wholeheartedly behind it.
Yeah.
And I'll help you.
Yeah.
Ooh, you just got an offer of help.
Wow.
How's it feel to be...
Drinks.
There you go. That works.
That is what that means.
That works.
All right, so would you like then to move forward? Do you want to quickly say that you are either for or against moving forward with some customization of this set of
Exploring
ideas?
further detail.
Yeah, I think that we have caveats to work through, but this is great, should be done.
Yep.
So Cassie, would you like to, with
January?
Josh? Sure.
Because December sounds wicked busy.
Well, yes.
Normally.
Why don't you take that to January? Take a couple months.
Okay.
There
Do
you
some
go.
thinking.
I can have a little bit of input on the housing stuff, my
Yeah.
part of it.
We have
As I
60
said, there was
seconds.
very little that I could find in the United States, strangely enough. What I did find was primarily for like neighborhood associations, and they generally revolved around presentability. What I did find though is Canada. Both the cities of Vancouver and Victoria, they have empty homes taxes, which is kind of cool.
So just to dovetail on that, one of the solutions that I had thought of, and I don't know if it's legal, and maybe that's why we're not seeing it in the US, is that when something's deemed a blighted property, put a zoning overlay on it and make the taxes double, triple, get them moving.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily
No,
saying
that's-
double or triple, but start penalizing them through property taxes for a blighted property, because it's hurting everybody.
Yeah.
Don't know if it's legal though.
Well, I think in some case, I think of the Everett Street property
With the city owns.
that the city owns.
Which one?
That you would consider to be blight if you looked at it. Don't know how to describe where it is. when
It's a gray,
Setback pretty good.
Yes.
gray Cape house near the intersection of Parsons Street.
Yeah.
Oh, I know
and
what you're
Everett
talking
Street.
about.
Setback away,
Yeah.
setback
It's
away.
got the condemned symbol on it.
So
Sure
to
does.
Chris's point, what happens is when somebody just walks away,
Yep.
it's going to end up looking like that.
Yep.
But unfortunately, it's a very lengthy process. The city will own it through tax title.
Yeah.
for non-payment of taxes. So the city owns that home. And presumably it's coming down and a multifamily is gonna go in its place, low-income housing, I think.
Yeah, there was proposals.
Affordable, I should say.
You know,
But if you could start penalizing, like when that house went dormant at some point,
There's nobody to penalize. They took off. They said, here's the keys, it's all yours.
Oh.
And then the process you wish you could speed up is the process that the city has to go through to get a tax title.
Yeah.
You need a
Land
calendar
court.
more than a watch to
Well,
figure out how
you
long it
remember
takes.
too, in that case, though, see, that house belonged to a gas station.
Right.
So there was a toxic site.
Oh.
You know, that basically, the new owner, a person bought the gas station, then things happened, and yeah, he went belly up. And it took 4 or 5 years before the city owned it.
Right.
And they had to do some remediation and this and that. But the house itself, you know, it could have been dealt with by now.
Right, but I guess what I was liking to Chris is back in the '08, when, you know, the whole housing issue came up, you know, in the banking business, there were people who literally left the keys on the kitchen
Yeah.
table with a note and said goodbye. And the bank ends up taking the house. That's different than obviously blight, but if the house gets so much in a state of disrepair that the owner says, I'm just gonna get in my car tonight and nobody will ever find me because I'm moving to another state, we can try to penalize all we want, but they figure there's no value left, so off they drive.
yeah.
No, but
That might be rare, but.
Yeah.
all right, but it's like, I remember the house in Sterling Drive, I won't get into it, but one day the neighbor called the police because water was coming out of the cellar windows.
Oh my God.
The house, you know, was owned by a bank and was not taken care of.
Oh, boy.
The pipes burst.
Yeah.
And the ground was frozen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You know,
see,
and there's many examples of that in Springfield. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
and then,
Yeah.
but that turns to blight, you know.
yeah, the point is, right, to avoid the blight and give incentive to, if you know you're not doing anything with this house, especially banks.
Right.
If they have to start paying more taxes just to
Right.
maintain it, then
Yeah.
they'll auction it off a lot faster.
if it's bank owned, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot
Right,
of them
and
tend
of course
to be
they're-
the big banks out of the area, you know,
Right,
credit.
It's not the local banks.
The Wells Fargo's,
Yeah.
with all due respect, and,
Yeah.
Bank of America.
yeah, with all due respect to the.
No respect to Bank of America. In Washington, the tax rate's normally 85 cents. If your property's vacant, it's $5. You were talking about
Yeah.
twice.
So it must be legal.
And then if it's a blighted real property, it's $10. 85 cents to $10.
Well, it's not called a tax though, right? It's
Right.
called a fee. It's not called tax, it's called a fee.
It's a tax.
Oh, is it labeled a tax?
Yeah, 'cause it's
Every
per
state is a little
thousand,
different
yeah.
how they do it, but yeah.
Office of Tax and Revenue Tax Class Schedule.
Who's the other person in December I've got, Jen?
Janet Tatro.
Shannon Tatro?
Yeah. I'll send the names and emails. Just an example. So, we could, I mean, the two of you took on this, would you like to think together about potentially offering up some combined idea
We'll come back with a
that's blight related? Okay. What a treat. That will be in January, you got 2 months, go. So, we're past 5:30 by 4 minutes. You all are rock stars. Thank you so much for being here. Does anybody want to move to close this meeting?
I make a motion.
Every hand goes up.
Any seconds? All in favor of leaving, holler aye. Thank you so much. I'll see you next month.